I parked Route 27 at Bay 12 and saw him right away. A little kid in a green dinosaur hoodie, sitting too straight for his size. No bag, no coat, a leg brace that squeaked every time he shifted. A chipped blue toy bus rolling across the bench slats like he was keeping time. And he told me with that brave, small voice that his dad was buying tickets. And I kept my eyes on the glass doors, on the clock, on that stubborn empty space where a parent is supposed to walk in, and nobody came. Some nights don't explode. They just sink. And before you realize it, you're already under, so I stepped off the bus, crouched to his level, asked his name. Heard. Jalen asked for his dad's name. Heard. Troy and I nodded like we were all on schedule, when anyone could see we weren't. I'm Martin Cole, used to run a construction outfit foreman. To owner lived on bids and blueprints, and the belief that a strong back and a tighter plan could fix anything. Then my son Aiden got sick, and all the money and hustle in the world couldn't push that needle. So I retired, because walking into rooms where his cap still hung felt like walking into a punch. And the quiet in my house got so loud, I had to do something that touched people for real. Not on a board, not on a spreadsheet, so I started driving nights 3 shifts a week around Port Amber, and the bus gave me routes and faces and the sound of engines covering the places where grief used to shout. I checked the ticket desk and asked about Brooks. Got the clerk's slow head shake, got the guard's tired shrug, called dispatch. Asked for a patrol car, then went right back to the bench. Because the kid was lining the toy bus wheels with the grooves in the wood. Serious, whispering numbers, as he matched the ridges like it was a puzzle only he could hear. And when I asked what he was counting, he pointed up at the ceiling lights and said, the even ones were dimmer, like a rhythm. He wanted to keep steady. And I thought, yeah, I know that feeling. Trying to hold the room together with your own breath. The cops pulled in. Officer Duran did the questions. Walked the lot, came back, and said they'd found an old sedan near the west exit. Empty. No bag, no car seat, just a paper plate on the floor with a ring of ketchup dried into a target. And he told me child services was on the way. I could head out shift over. Thanks for caring. And I said I'd wait. You know what I mean? Some things you don't clock out on. The station slipped into that late-hour hush where even mop water moves carefully. A janitor hummed and drew slow, wet rectangles. A woman in a red jacket wrestled with a vending machine until the pretzels gave up. Jalen blinked slower and slower and finally put his cheek on my sleeve without asking and held still, like he didn't want to bother the air. And I sat with him and thought about Aiden, lining matchbox cars on my dashboard and citing traffic violations like a judge. Because small boys believe in order. They believe in someone who says, I got you, and means it. And somewhere in the middle of that quiet, I realized the jacket over this kid's shoulders wasn't charity. It was a promise. It was. The social worker arrived with that soft voice people learn when they're always the second responder. I signed whatever. Let me sit another hour, she said. They'd take it from here. I nodded, and then I didn't move until they drove him away. And I watched the taillights leave like a chapter closing too soon. 2 days later, I visited, because I had said I would. And I half expected him not to remember me. But he looked up from a wobbly table with a stack of tired crayons and said, Bus man, with a grin, too big for his face. And on his paper were circles and lines and little decimals that looked like doodles until they didn't. and the attendant laughed and told me he makes math, then talks not the other way around, and when I asked Jalen how he knew which piece was which, he shrugged and said he could hear it like a song, which I believed even if I couldn't explain it. That night, I called Ms. Chen, a lawyer who's told me hard truths before, asked her to find the father, not to crucify a man who might already be nailed to something, but to put the facts on the table so we could feed the kid something besides mystery. And a week later, we had a room number at a weekly motel behind a diner on Archer Street. The TV was balanced on a milk crate, a half-eaten burger sat on a phone bill, and Troy looked older than his file photo, and angry in the way men get when the world has rolled them, and they're ready to swing at the next thing that moves. And he didn't wait for me to talk, he said. I was here to judge him in my nice suit, and I told him I wore this suit to a funeral. I still can't bring myself to donate, and I drive a city bus 3 nights a week, and I'm here because his son is waiting. He flinched at the word, son. The bravado cracked just enough for air to get in. Then he slammed the remote, and the screen bloomed with a commercial. Nobody was watching, and he said that his girl Leah died in delivery, that the doctor said, sign here, and choose this. And he did, and then he watched a life leave and a life stay, and he looked at that boy, and saw the choice that wrecked him, and he tried to work, tried to be steady. But jobs get shaky when you have to ask for time and rides and braces and meetings, and he hated the way the world looked at the brace, and then at him, and he ran out of fight. I didn't keep the heat out of my voice, I told him. My boy died, and money didn't change it, and I'd give all of it for one more cracker crumb hug. And he had what I lost, and walked away, yeah. That happened. And he stared at the wall, because nothing in that room could defend him. And finally, he said he wasn't good for Jalen. Maybe someone else could be. And that was the first honest thing between us. The hearing was a month later paperwork, and fluorescent lights, and the soft squeak of a brace on courthouse tile. Ms. Chen speaking in those gentle steel sentences that get kids home, Ms. Klein from Child Services with the supervised visit logs. The judge asking if I understood the responsibility, and me nodding, because my throat was already tight. And when the clerk stepped out for a stamp, I saw Troy look at his kid. Quick and full and raw. Then he looked down at his hands, because he couldn't hold the sight steady. He signed and left. And there were no fireworks, just a door and a hallway, and Jalen tapping a rhythm on the edge of his chair, like the world would keep turning if he kept time. I brought him home that afternoon to a house that had been museum quiet since we boxed up Aiden's baseball caps, and the first time his brace squeaked on my hardwood. I thought, there it is, the sound of life, and he asked to sleep with the curtains open so he could count the blinking tower lights downtown. And he pressed his forehead to the glass and whispered 7 on 3, off 7 on 3, off, and I scheduled a full evaluation, not because I wanted a label, but because I wanted to meet him, where his mind lived. Dr. Alvarez ran games that look like toys until a kid solves them faster than the adults. Then came scans with humming that always trips some wire in me, and at the end, she set down her tablet and told me he had a gifted profile for pattern recognition and numbers more than gifted, and that he'd need support to keep his body strong and his head challenged. And he tapped her desk 4 times exactly and smiled like she'd told him the sky was a math problem, waiting patiently to be solved. We built a new rhythm, soft and steady pancakes on Sundays, where he lined blueberries in a spiral and corrected my spacing with the seriousness of an architect's stair practice, where he took the climb 1 rail at a time and came down, sitting bump by bump, calling the steps by made-up station names, afternoons at the bus yard, where the mechanics handed him a dull pencil so he could trace tread wear on printouts. He sorted by pattern like a tiny engineer, and one evening he watched me balance a checkbook and asked why I carried the one, and I explained. And he listened and said there was a faster way, and he showed me, and there was. And if you think that didn't sting in a way that felt good, you don't know how a kid can put your pride in its place with a smile. He still asked for his dad at night softly, like he didn't want to bother the air. And I told him the truth. He could hold, that his dad was trying not to be lost anymore, and it takes time. And he nodded, and set the blue bus on the windowsill like a guard on duty. A few days later, Ms. Chen dropped a small box of Jalen's things on my kitchen table. The agency's leftovers from the night he came in. And inside was a star sock with no partner, a receipt with a ladder doodled on the back, a cracked prepaid flip phone that somehow held a charge. And when I plugged it in, there was one voicemail. A man trying to keep his voice from breaking as he said, "I am not good at this. I am trying to be someone you can be proud of, and I keep breaking things. If you end up with someone better, let him be better. I'm sorry," and it didn't have a timestamp. So it sat there like a ghost between us, and I drove to the Archer Street lot and listened to it twice with the engine off, and I didn't forgive him, and I didn't hate him. I just understood a crooked thing. I never thought I would, that sometimes men who hate themselves set their kids down because they think that is mercy. It isn't. But I recognized the twisted shape of the idea. When Jalen asked to see our stop, we went bay. 12, mostly empty, the janitor waving like we were regulars, and he climbed on the bench and set his blue bus in the middle and said, "Some kid will need a ride. This one can wait." And I told him he didn't have to leave it, and he shrugged and said, "I got you." Said it like gravity, absolute and calm. And I touched that battered little bus and had to swallow before my voice worked, and I told him I got you too. A cousin of one of the mechanics freelances, and the local paper ran a soft feature because he bragged transit driver adopts boy. Left at station, a picture of us in front of bus 842, where Jalen stuck his tongue out in the first shot and grinned in the second. A professor from Lakeview called Dr. Alvarez to offer puzzles and games, and a cohort where kids who think in music and numbers won't be told to color inside lines that never fit them. And I told him we'd think about it, because Jalen is a kid first, not a case study. And to their credit, they said good. There's your twist right there, I guess. The world called him disabled, and the test said extraordinary, and the bigger twist sat in a plain envelope that arrived a month after that article with no return address. Handwriting like someone taught himself in a hurry, and I knew it before I opened it. And Troy said he saw the paper, and Jalen looked good, and I was right, and he was wrong, and he was trying to fix his life. He didn't want to take the boy. He only wanted to know. If someday Jalen could know. He kept trying. And if the answer was no, he would keep trying anyway. And I set the letter by my coffee and let it sit there like a coin that could pay for one step toward grace or one step toward another. Kind of hurt, and I carried it all day like a pocket weight and asked myself what lesson I want to hand a child who sorts the world into patterns so he can feel safe. That love is action and responsibility, yes. That people can change if they do the work every day, maybe. That both truths don't always sit neatly together, absolutely. There is no clean ending, and that is the honest relief. Because people aren't projects. You close out with a punch list. They're weather. You learn the pattern, and you still bring an umbrella. And in our house, truth has a chair at the table, so some nights I play the voicemail out loud, so the air hears what we know, and some nights we leave it off and cut apples into fourths and practice fractions and laugh when the juice runs down our wrists. And Jalen still pads to my room sometimes and stands there, patient as a statue, until I say, "You good?" And he climbs in, brace and all, and holds still like the world might notice and complain. If he moves too loud, some days, he's sunshine. Some days, the brace rubs, and the math is too easy. And he's a storm with sneakers, and we adjust. We learn the new pattern, and I'm better, because he makes me earn the dad I want to be. If you're looking for a miracle, it didn't arrive with a spotlight. It showed up in a green hoodie and a squeaky brace and a chipped blue bus, and the stubborn gentleness of a kid who sorts chaos into order just to make it bearable. And it showed up in the way I stopped pretending. Grief is a place to live, and the night I found him, I thought I was watching a stranger's. Turns out I was watching the beginning of myself again. So tell me, and say it like we're both sitting on a plastic bench waiting on the last bus. No filters. If you were me, would you let Troy try again someday, under rules that make Jalen's safety non-negotiable? Or does walking away mean the door stays shut for good? Is forgiveness the same as access in your book? Where do you draw that line when a child's heart is in the balance? And what did your neighborhood teach you about second chances? Because good people disagree on this, and I want to hear your take. If this story hit something true for you, drop a comment, argue it out respectfully, tell me what you've seen, hit it like, share it with someone who needs a reason to keep going, and subscribe for more real stories about right and wrong. When life gets complicated, yeah, that happened. And we're still here, trying to do the next right thing together.